Right, hello everybody, and welcome to the latest episode of the Viking Chats podcast. And I'm joined today by the skinny, demure, and softly spoken Ben Madden. Hey, buddy.
That is the most interesting introduction I've ever had, and I'll take it.
I'm just disappointed I didn't get a description in there of what you look like in a black dress, because that really should have been part of that bio.
Yeah, I mean,
the only person who can give Posh Spice and Sporty Spice a run for their money at the same time.
I think this podcast will come a day earlier. I think it would have been funnier for us to be filming it like actually Friday after I've been beaten up. I think that would be a very different look and vibes. That's when we should have done this. But actually, no, I'm happy that we're doing it now, but I've still got my nose intact.
Now, for those who don't know what the hell I'm talking about, first things first, me seeing Ben in a dress, not a private pastime habit that we have, not a spin-off side action group of the Boys Club. This relates to some shenanigans that actually, if I remember correctly, Ben was the instigator of, and wrote myself and other. I mean, Simon Well doesn't fall into that category. He's unaware of everything and a willing participant in everything. But for the rest of us, we slightly naively agreed last year for the Agents Giving Ball to take part with Ben and perform as the Spice Boys. And no, that's not some kind of Pan-Asian pop tribute. We tried our best to replicate that iconic 90s pop girl group. And we did it with aplomb, I have to say.
I love the confidence. For anyone who hasn't seen it, Kristjan has delivered that perfectly. For anyone who has seen it, Kristjan's a liar. There you go.
I'm not a liar. I'm just, I like to massage the truth. There's poetry in everything that we do in life, Ben. You should know that. As a marketer.
You are the ultimate poet, mate. I'll give you that. I'll give you that.
Talking about you having a battered nose, we're not talking about your typical East London estate agent after a hard week on a Friday down the pub. We are talking about you going a few rounds, again, not with an East London agent after a tough week and a Friday night in an East London pub, but you are actually taking part in Rumble in the Jungle.
Yeah, bad choices all around here. Life choices. Really got to look at myself in the mirror. So, the thing I decided a few years ago is that I'm going to take part in like some sort of event every year. It focuses the mind. I try and do charity stuff, but this is like front and center. Have to do it. Put yourself on the chopping block. So last year we did Spice Boys. The year before that, I did a dance, which was the most terrifying thing I've ever done. This year it's a boxing match meant to be against the property professional, but because I'm getting on a bit in age and I'm a bit of a lump. They didn't really have a match-up.
Mr. Muscles, hold on a minute. You're being a little bit too modest here. It's because of your hard 75 you've done for the last 5 days. I met up with you recently and was like, I might expect a little comment after Ben. I've been looking after myself the last 90 days. You walked in the room with fucking guns like Mr. T, and I was like, oh, that's disappointing.
This is the most surreal start to a podcast. I'm loving it. This is going to get played over and over and over again.
This podcast in the morning.
This is it. This has made my day. It's made my week. This is the hype I need for tomorrow. Yeah, so tomorrow, Rumble with the agents, meant to be fighting a state agent, not fighting someone who is now a bit of a boxer, not a professional, but used to be a rap musician. His name is Big Tobes. You can see him on YouTube. He's a big boy. He likes a haymaker. Definitely not what I signed up for, but it's for Centrepoint, which actually, as charities goes, is just a phenomenal charity. I'm such a huge supporter.
Yeah.
For anyone who doesn't know, it helps young people get out of homelessness. I just think it's awful. We had as part of this event, I thought more and more about how lucky my life was as a young man and what some people are going through. I've just, it's just astonishing that at 16-year-old you could be on the street and be homeless.
Yeah.
And so they do really, really brilliant work. And so it's shining a light on a good charity. We're going to raise loads of money. And if I get beaten up, you know, I guess that's the added benefit for a lot of my friends.
There's going to be a lot of people who as long as it's nothing serious, they're going to have quite a lot of fun seeing you knock down a peg or two, won't they, mate?
Honestly, I've never. So we've got a table at the event because, yeah, that's what you do. You take a table, and I put it out to people, you know, who would like to come. I've never been so popular. Everybody wants to come and see me get punched in the face, and yeah, you're exactly right. Nobody wants to see me get really hurt. Like I've had a lot of messages like everything going to be okay. But I've had plenty of that.
Okay, but can't wait to see you kiss the canvas.
Black eye, you know, broken nose that you recover from. Absolutely cool with that. Oh, I'm not cool with that, but yeah, okay, all right, great. So yeah, wish me luck.
Nice. So, so I tell you what, when we publish this, which when are you doing it? Tonight or tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night. So 19th of June.
Okay, so we'll try and get this out tomorrow in some sort of format, and then what we'll get you to drop a link in the comments where people can donate.
Great. Thank you.
So, and it's lovely. I didn't realize you were doing it for Centrepoint. So Centrepoint is the charity. The last time the Esters allowed me to turn up in my full Viking nonsensical regala, in the outfit that usually results in a lot of DMs from my Icelandic family being like, "What the fuck are you wearing?" But the last time the Esters allowed me to turn up a la Viking, I always do it for charity, and that was for Centrepoint. So yeah, absolutely, it is a very, very worthy charity tackling an issue that is quite frankly a mystery in this day and age. There we go. So. Look, talking about Centrepoint, I think that leads on quite nicely to something you and I work on together, and that is the Boys Club. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Boys Club, it is currently a Facebook group. I think we're trying to figure out what are other logical channels for it to operate in, but for now. It is a closed Facebook group, which is easy to join. I think the simple criteria is you just have to be a boy who's grown up a little bit, maybe not mentally. But look, we're doing our best to try and tackle this unfathomable cloud that is men's mental health right now, right? And I think,
go on. Sorry, I interrupted you.
I think no. I think the interesting thing with you and I is I think we both kind of see ourselves as quite mentally robust people. But this is definitely something that we've seen impact people around us, whether that's friends, family, industry colleagues, old schoolmates, whatever it is. Now. Tell us a bit more, mate. Obviously, this was very much your kind of project to begin with, and your what made you feel like you needed to take some action here and try and do something.
So yes, join the dots up. Yeah, I think you're right. You and I fall into a category where we're quite lucky to our DNA means we're quite sort of mentally, maybe emotionally resilient. And I think maybe some of that is through lived experience. Some of that is genetic. Some of that is just it is what it is. And so I don't really speak to this subject from a great deal of lived experience, but I guess why it became almost like a passion for me, which sounds sort of strange to almost say that out loud, actually. So my granddad passed away probably about 15 years ago. I was raised by two quite tough parents, like really tough. Actually, I'm understating that. My mum, her dad, the grandfather I'm talking about, he was a London gangster, very tough, very unpleasant human being at times. He would beat my nan to a pulp in front of my mum, so she grew up as a child seeing that, witnessing that. It led to my mum being a very tough person because it was a horrible environment. My dad's mum passed away before he was a teenager. So he was raised on a council estate in West London by his bricklayer dad, who was an alcoholic. And so they just were raised in tough environments. They're tough people. They're combative people.
Yeah.
The reason I'm just painting that picture is because when my granddad died, my mum's dad, who was the gangster, who there was a relationship, but it was a very strange relationship. As a child, I thought it was normal, but looking back, very strange relationship. My mum came close to having a breakdown, which is quite a strange thing. To someone that someone that very strange relationship with him, wasn't close to him. This tough woman that I'd never seen cry, or very rarely would you see upset, ferocious, came close to having a breakdown. It took time for her to feel better. There was medication involved, and so I think that was my first insight into. Maybe everything is not exactly as it seems. 15 years ago, mid-20s, bit naive, bit cocksure. If you think 20 years ago, you say things like, well, you're depressed because you want to be depressed. Yeah, that was how naive people were around the subject of depression. You can stop it if you want.
Rolling on the dark shit.
And that, honestly, 20 years ago, I think that's the world we were in. And I was one of those characters, and I saw it with my mum firsthand. And was like, well, if this tough woman is not capable of just fixing herself, it's a legitimate thing. So that's my first sort of insight. Then a few years later, we had someone in my first business, young guy. He joined the business right out of school, worked his way from administrative position to a marketing position to a sales position, and really good kid. I describe it. Max had this huge hair, short guy, amazing at basketball. Like, you just don't see this coming. Like, when I say amazing, it was like watching a professional athlete, and he's he's so much shorter than sort of your average guy in the UK, let alone a basketball player who's dwarfing him. Anyway, really good kid. He smokes a bit of wacky-backy every now and again, and found himself smoking the wrong stuff just as he got a promotion. And the sort of combination of events led to him not getting enough sleep. There was a really potent strain of something doing the rounds in the UK. Anyway, he found he had a breakdown, and it happened in such an extreme fashion. In the space of 3 days, he went from being like, well, something's not right about Max, to hospitalized with it.
Wow.
And I think in hindsight now, I can look back and think that I felt the reason it had such an impact on me is that I think I should have seen it, I should have spotted it, I should have been able to do something about it sooner, and that's why it had such it had such a big impact on me at the time.
Yeah.
Whether I was probably being a bit hard on myself because I didn't even work in the same office as him, but you feel, as a business owner, you feel parental, especially to the young ones that you bring from school, and you feel like you should spot these things. So anyway, actually, I've said recently on video, when asked my proudest moment, people ask about, what's your proudest moment, and I think I don't particularly like that question. I'm not, people say things like awards or sort of. My proudest moment is the way the team behaved in bringing this person, I think, back to life.
Yeah.
And so we had a really hardcore sales team, lots of fun, intense. And when Max was ready to come back, I stayed in contact with his parents. He was heavily medicated. It took a long time. We're going to bring him back on a part-time basis, very different role. And when I brought the entire team together and said, Max is going to come back, you guys are known for taking the piss, for being a nightmare, for doing things you shouldn't do. You're brilliant at your job, but I can see that in this area, this is not where you guys perform well. I expect a different sort of behaviour. Yeah. And hand on heart, I believe that team brought this young man back to life. Wow. They brought him back in. It was softly. They built up his energy. They built up his confidence. And in a matter of time, he was back. He was good. He was solid. And those two instances, I think, I've thought about it recently because people asked me about the Boys Club. I think they're the two things that sort of shaped direction of travel. That I've had those experiences. It's a real thing. It can happen to anyone.
I think it's really interesting you talk about that, and it's really interesting how you talk about how you frame that with the team. So that's my brother-in-law. I call him that. He's the father to my niece. He had some extreme mental health issues a while back, and it's something he will now have to deal with for the rest of his life. But I think much in a similar vein to what you've said, I kind of, was a very brash, confident, cocky kind of teenager, early 20s person. And then thinking, God, I'm trying to think when this happened. This would have probably been kind of 15 years ago. So we'd started base, but early doors. And I still had a pretty simplistic view of life and how we got on with stuff. And like many people, I think 15, 20 years ago, my thoughts on mental health were insanely uninformed and very simplistic. I mean, we've touched on earlier, it was kind of that, just put a smile on your face and just crack on, mate, you'll be fine. Come out the other end. And my brother-in-law got sectioned under the Mental Health Act, and obviously separated from my sister, but was obviously very much still a part of my niece's life, who was still young at the time. And it's been fascinating to see her grow up knowing that her dad has had these issues, and kind of at times having some not scary, intimidating, but just scary, bewildering moments, through to where she now is a 25-year-old woman, and she actually currently works in a mental health charity for young people, which I'm sure is not by chance. But sorry, bringing it back to what I was trying to say, when my sister first told me, I remember having a very naive and very immature reaction to it at the time. However, because my sister was separated from him, he at the time lived in Highbury, which is 10-15 minutes from our office in a car. And once he was released, none of his family live in London. They are not the greatest of communicators, especially about difficult stuff. So, my sister turned to me at the time and was like, look, he needs someone he feels safe with, that he can call up when he's spiraling, and talk to or be with. And it transpired that the only person realistically that could be was me, because I was the only person close enough who was in a position where I had, being self-employed, I had an element of control of being able to go, well, actually, I don't have a meeting for 3 hours. So, and we went through a period of about 3 months where I would see him several times a week. And I would get a call from him on a fairly regular occasion, and it would either be, I'm spiraling, how soon can you get here? Or I've started spiraling, I'm walking, I'm going to walk down your way. It would take him, 45 minutes to an hour to walk down, and we'd meet just up the road in Hoxton Square, and we'd have a walk. And, you and I talk about, and we'll obviously come onto this in a minute, are jousting over how we develop the boys club and how we tackle this leviathan that is men's mental health and the challenges a lot of men face. But the fascinating thing with Chris was, I have no medical background, no mental health training. As I said, as we both said, my attitudes to mental health at the start of that process were very naive and simple, and very uninformed. But interestingly, what helped him through that 3 months was us just talking. That's all. I would just let him talk. I would just let him, whatever was bouncing around. I mean, he's a hyper intelligent guy, hyper intelligent. I mean, I won't go into too many details, but my sister had to go through in-depth security checks when she went to move in with him. He was involved with government stuff where he would come home with a suitcase full of top secret documents, and would advise government and all sorts of things on. So and obviously, you know, a lot of that fed into the issues he had, and it was fascinating how much of a difference was achieved, like I said, literally by him and I, and that's all we would ever do. Whether I went up to him or he came down to me, it would just be us walking along the street, walking around the garden square, doing laps around the park, and it would just be letting him, you know, unburden himself with whatever it was. And sometimes it made sense, and sometimes it was the most paranoid and bizarre nonsense you kind of have ever heard. But, you know, with the stuff that made sense, you know, we just had a conversation like you would have a conversation with anyone. With the stuff that went off script, shall we say, you know, a lot of that conversation was just about trying not to react, of being like, what are you talking about? You know, that's crazy talk. Because guess what? Talking crazy talk to someone who's having mental health issues, not the best approach. But a lot of it just centered around me going, you know, kind of calling him out or questioning him about these bizarre thoughts he would have. And a lot of that, it was just asking him questions. It wasn't actually me talking, which I know will shock a lot of people listening to this podcast. There's one thing I'm highly skilled at. It is waffling on forever. But no, fascinatingly, a lot of that stemmed from, like I said, just he would say something like, I don't know, for example, oh, those people over there are watching us, you know, I think they're recording our conversation, you know, and it would just be like, why do you think they're recording us? Why do you think they're observing our conversation? Let's do another lap, and you know, but yeah, it was that 3 months and several years. You know, obviously that was a major thing. I think over the next kind of 3 or 4 years, he got sectioned 3 times. It was amazing to see my sister really stand by a guy who she was long-term separated from, and she was kind of his rock, really. And it was nice to be able to play a part in that, not only for my sister and for him, but obviously for my niece as well. But yeah, it's a funny one. I think so many people have no concept of what that unraveling can be like, and I think every incident is again unique to itself. But until you are confronted with it, you know, whether it's at work or at home, and again, you know, with you talked about it with your mum as well, until you encounter it firsthand, it's almost impossible to explain or fully understand, I think. Because
I think that is about so many things. I've got an example I use all the time where I used to think I was reasonably empathetic, and then I had kids, and basically I realized just how tough it was to be a parent and go to work every day, and someone's got to stay at home with the kid when one of them's ill, or someone's got to go pick them up for this, or someone's got to take them somewhere. And I remember getting frustrated with members of the team that had family and were being pulled all from pillar to post years ago. And then, you know, within months of having my first of 3, I'm like, okay, now I get it. I thought I could get it before, but I couldn't get it. And it's the same mental, it's, you know, for so many things in life, we think we understand, we want to understand. It's not that we don't most of the time, but until you've lived it, it is so difficult. And I think in particular, men's mental health is one of those funny ones that, as we both already said, until we had experience of it, let's say 15 years ago, both of us, we weren't into the subject matter. We weren't aware of the subject matter. We weren't necessarily even interested in the subject matter. Might be fair to say.
And I think I know, speaking for myself, my attitude around it would have been very flippant.
Yeah, and same. And I think that's going to be the same for men up and down the country, because if they are in their head, they're this resilient character and they don't have their own mental health issues, they will, naturally, well, everyone should be like me, shouldn't they? That sort of thing falls in, and they don't, and they've experienced it themselves. And as you said, with a friend, a colleague, family member, then it is difficult. And I think that's why it's a particularly difficult subject to get traction on.
Well, you also right? Hey, they've got a great job. They've got a lovely family. They live in a nice house. They drive a nice car. They go on nice holidays. Whatever it is, you kind of rationalize it away with doing this is what the world sees. And I think, look, if I know you've heard Chris's chat because he came and shared it with the boys club, and people are at PropX, and I think he's shared the story at other events now. But Chris Webbs is a fascinating example of the fact that, on the surface, he was crushing it. Great job, great income, nice car, beautiful wife, beautiful house, on that trajectory of what he always thought life and success looked like. And there he was underneath it all, as sad as could possibly be, plotting and planning how to exit.
Well, a mutual friend of ours has just been through that. They I won't betray a trust. They did post about it in the boys club, but obviously this is going out to a wider group. But a friend of theirs has just taken their own life. I say a month or two ago, and on the face of it, it's almost impossible to understand. Got a family, great career, successful person, and it just, in this instance, 2 and 2 is adding up to 5. From the outside looking in, you can't logically comprehend why is this individual found themselves in this position? Because that's mental health. It's not maths.
It's not logical, and that's the problem, isn't it? And I think particularly as men, and again, we're working to typicalities or generalizations here. But as men, we love logic. We love, like you said, we love 2 + 2 = 4. Anything else is mad science or batshit voodoo. So, like you said, we look at a problem like mental health, and you try to rationalize it away. And therein lies the ongoing stumble and fumble that we go on this journey, as we try to figure out what the boys club looks like and what's going to really deliver that seismic change. And I think maybe again that is you and I being too logical about it, too results driven. We love our work where you put in XYZ, you put in a plan, you execute a plan, and you might not get exactly the results you want, but you're going to be within a 10% margin either side. And I think that's the tricky thing with what we're trying to achieve with the boys club is
I mean, look, I think it's worth saying that we've tried to do 3 different things. The things we do in the boys club, if men in the property sector would like to join, is that up until actually the last couple of months, we have a monthly meeting. When I say a meeting, it's an online chat, it's a get together, and we hear from one of our members and they tell their story. And we know that's powerful because we've had feedback from people in the group that say how powerful it is to hear that story, to hear other people's experiences, to hear that you're not alone in what you're going through. You hear somebody else say it, and then, okay, if they're willing to talk about it, maybe I'm willing to talk about it to somebody else. So we know that there is some power in that. You're right, we're both results oriented or goals or results driven people, and we want to ramp that up. We want to do more, we want to help more people, which is, it's natural. I won't ever position that as a negative. You are one of the most genuine people I've ever met. And that is, there's nothing wrong with wanting to help more people. It's just a frustration trying to work out how to do that. So one of the ideas we've got is a get together. So maybe sort of in the autumn time, we're going to try and pull whoever in the group wants to get together. Maybe it's a really long walk up a mountain. Maybe it's camping. Maybe it's an overnight somewhere else. Something, because what we do know men are good at is getting together and having a chat in a more what's the word I'm looking for, in a more traditional environment. We're in the outside world.
It's not a record. I think that's something else. You said the impact it's had, like you, I've had some people go, oh my God, that really resonated with where I found myself a couple of years ago. But I think interestingly, I've also had some people go, and you and I talked about this when we were chatting on something earlier. I've had people come up saying like there are traits to their brain or their personality that are quite topical right now, and part of them wants to kind of share their journey within that space, but part of them is also I'm not ready yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really interesting to hear as well. It's great to hear that some of the stories that people have shared have landed and have really resonated and helped, but I think it's also nice to hear that there is a bit of growth happening, but this one thing, and like you said, the meeting up in person, the kind of more informal backslapping, having
high-fiving, a bit of banter, a bit of fun,
but letting those moments of reality drop in there. And I think the problem we're always going to have with the social media group, with the WhatsApp group, with anything like that, is no matter how close it is fundamentally still a record. People can still go back there and go, oh, what did that person say a month ago? I'm pretty sure. Whereas there is something absolutely lovely about, like you said, whether it's sitting in a pub, sitting in a campsite, hiking up a mountain, whatever it is, you can spend a day talking about everything, doing everything from taking the piss out of one another to sharing your deepest, darkest secrets. And then you can walk away at the end of that day and it's something you've experienced, but there is no record. It doesn't get held up to your face. It doesn't get examined by your colleagues, your competitors, and your friends and family.
I think it's really nice. The issue we've got at the moment is in the digital world, we are one group of 200 people, and some of us know each other, and so we're friends away from that group. But once we get a group of people somewhere, new friendship groups are formed because you have one-on-one conversations, because you find out you have things in common, or I've seen you online and we've had a chat online and now I'm meeting you in the real world. And that is one of the I guess beautiful things about social media is it now starts the journey to making new friends, which sounds so naff, but I think that will have a really powerful impact, meeting up with people in real life that you've only met digitally, that you've got something in common with. But I would just much rather spend 15 minutes over a pint of lager talking to you, sort of, how we used to do it 20 years ago. So, yeah, I'm really excited for that. I think that would be cool. And if people want to join, just, get involved.
Yeah, absolutely. Come and join the group. Come and share the group. Don't overthink it, overcommit. Just get in and, comment and stuff, like stuff, share stuff if you feel like it. I think from Ben and my perspective, and the other guys involved, Spencer, Toby, Daniel, obviously there is some sort of metric. We like to see some form of engagement in the group, but we're not. There is no stipulation that you've got to share some epic life story or some dark precipice that you're teetering on at the moment. Just some sort of engagement or sharing. Like I say, whether it is a click on a like button or a little comment or a reassurance or whatever it is. I think that just kind of lets us know that what we're doing in some way helps and in some way generally heading in the right direction. And if anyone equally wants to step up and has suggestions and wants to, as Ben said, I think we want to explore more and more ideas and attempts at tackling this. And I think what's really interesting, like Ben said, is we kind of want to go back to a large part of this is kind of going back to how things were 15-20 years ago. And I think that's why we've got a lot of mental health issues in young men as well, is because of this digital universe that
isolated, looking at the screen.
Yeah. Isolation, and not only that, as we know that whatever the word is, what's the word I'm trying to say? That presented version of yourself.
The fake. You're living your best life. Everything is
fabulous. Look how bloody beautiful I am. I'm loving life. I'm the best dad ever, and my business is better than everybody's. And we all know, no one gets it all right. I think, and anything that pulls us away from that. And look, I think something really interesting, again, we've talked about the digital environment of stuff. And I think, touching on mental health for young people, I've had this conversation with mates. I went to boarding school for 10 years, as a lot of people know. And as anyone who's been to boarding school knows, you get up to a lot of silly shit at boarding school, particularly 20, 30 years ago, in a very privileged boarding school full of very rich people, predominantly white. There is a lot of tomfoolery and roughhousery and all sorts of shenanigans and ridiculous crap we got onto that, thank Christ, there is no record of today. I think again, that's a massive thing for young people, is the ability to make mistakes, the ability to do silly shit, the ability to let something incredibly stupid fall out of your face because of that's how you were raised, because that is the naive little bubble that you grew up in. And then you emerge from that bubble into the real fucking world and learn a couple of lessons, and then you suddenly are like, and like you said, I think we're the last generation that was allowed to make mistakes, and there was no record of it.
Well, look, we were talking about this a little bit earlier, weren't we? That now, I guess our generation, I think, are sometimes reluctant to have a conversation online because of repercussions. They're not, and I don't mean, I guess I should provide a bit of context there. I don't mean they don't want to be vulnerable online. In fact, actually, I think there's a disingenuous level of vulnerability being displayed by some, with marketing in the background. Let's be this character, let's draw people in and whatever we need to be. But what I mean is conversations that are slightly spiky. Maybe you're not so well informed and you're reluctant to open up dialogue on that because you may be attacked for the wrong opinion, or people are comfortable to be offended at the smallest things nowadays. And so I can understand why some people are reluctant to have those conversations online. And I think it's a shame, because I remember, what would it have been, maybe 10 years ago, there was quite a lot of dialogue and rhetoric around the blame culture that we built in this country.
Yeah.
And when something went wrong in business or in life, who can we blame? And now it's it sort of feels like we've built up a bit of a judgment culture to me.
Yeah.
That if somebody has a different opinion to me, I'm going to judge them on that rather than just accept that it's just an opinion. Why is that such an issue? So I can see how young people definitely struggle with that now, because you're absolutely right. Anything you say online, we've got a record of it. Now you're never going to get away with it. We were allowed to make those mistakes in real life. But as slightly older people in our current generation, I think we see it as well. And it's that's one of the real shames, actually. I said, social media is a beautiful thing because it can build friendships. But the flip side is it can suppress great conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a weird and wonderful one, and it's gonna take a lot more people and a lot of different approaches and different efforts to crack it than we will ever muster. But I think it's definitely worth the effort. And yeah, like I said, there's already some signs there's some great stuff coming out, and I'm excited to see where we get with it. And yeah, I think we're genuinely going to help some people, and if we help a handful of people, then it's all been worthwhile, isn't it? Really?
No, I agree. I also think, from an estate agency perspective, the world is so different to when you and I started, and you were encouraged to hide keys and not work with other agents and be a nightmare. And I think back to like the sort of COVID era was a bit of a turning point where we all went online and we all decided that we're in this shit together and we're going to work it out. And that I really genuinely believe that 7 years ago, I felt very differently to probably how I do now, because I've got so many friends in the world of agency, and so many, genuine friends I would go for a beer with, not just colleagues, if you like. And that's fueled by social media and groups and getting to know each other. And so there's so much positivity, because I'm conscious that the last thing I said sounded I'm very negative about social media. There's always going to be a negative side, but I think we're a net positive actually for correct use and its impact on people.
So I think moving on from that and just kind of stumbling into a couple of more bits before we wrap up this wonderful waffle that you and I have here. I think it's quite fun for us to have a little chat again off the back of what we've been talking about, being busy people with business and other activities that center around that, but having a wife and family to return home to, and that juggle. I think this is I'm far from the first to comment on this, but I think every time any woman in a senior position gets interviewed by anyone of note, there's almost always a question in there about mum guilt, which I always find fascinating, because it's something that guys don't talk much about. I mean, I know, interestingly, we touched on the fact that we both consider ourselves pretty robust people mentally. I would actually say, interestingly, I probably struggle in that respect with my family life. Not because, I think in part because of what we touched on, business is very measurable. A charity task is very measurable. You sign up to do it and you set yourself a raise target, and then you either hit the target and do the event or you don't, right? And like we said, you set yourself business goals and you hit them, don't hit them. But more often than not, you know why you didn't hit them. The mysterious journey of parenthood and figuring out and benchmarking whether you are getting that stuff right. As you touched on, you had very strict parents growing up, and we didn't go into detail, but the depth of feeling in that very simple sentence you gave, I think told quite a lot. And I imagine there is a very conscious effort from you to ensure that your daughters have a very different experience with their parents growing up. But I think, again, like many, there will be attributes of your upbringing that you also do appreciate, because it's turned you into the person that you are. And that's not all bad. So,
Not all. Yeah, we're 98% there, but not all.
So yeah, I think it's just nice. You don't often hear agents talk about the dadding bit, and I mean, I'm really lucky. I live close to work, so I love the fact. I love the fact. I almost always love the fact I do the school run with the kids in the morning. The caveat I give to that is I definitely didn't like it yesterday morning when my daughter literally screamed at me for 2 hours about the fact she didn't want to go to school and how she didn't love me. I mean, that was an event. I felt like I had minor PTSD when I got into work yesterday. But I'm really, I hold on to that little moment quite quite hard. My wife about 6 months ago was like, oh, you know, why don't you go into work earlier, finish a bit earlier, which meant giving up the school run. And my immediate response was that absolutely not. You know, that morning, that time in the morning, getting ready, getting up, dressed, breakfast, and that walk to school, I love that. You know, I wouldn't give that up for tuppence. How do you find the juggle?
I think for me, parenting is the most conflicting thing I've ever had to handle, to deal with. So I guess touch on a few things. Yeah, my upbringing, very traditional, old school, and I try and take what I think are the best bits, the highlights, the good bits from that. You know, I want the girls to so anyone listening, I've got 3 daughters. They are 3, 5, and 9, and I think I probably make 99.9% of my decisions with them in mind. I want them to hear the word no, which I know sounds really negative, but
no. Really, very, very interesting discussion in our household right now.
Okay, yeah. So it comes up in ours a bit. So my wife had quite a tough upbringing, in that when she was younger, her dad had an affair, was an alcoholic, left her mum, and that led to her. You know, it was quite tough. Not a lot of money around. You know, tough choices around certain things, and so I can see it that my wife wants to give the girls what she didn't have.
Yeah,
and so. And of course, I get it. It's the same as and grandparents always, they just want to spoil their kids because it's wonderful, and it's giving them what they didn't have.
Grandparent rule, right? As a grandparent, you get that treat because you're the grandparent, but unfortunately, as the parent, you don't have that luxury.
You don't. And my major concern is, I think, and I don't know whether this is really the case or if I've picked it up from things I've read and I've heard about the I guess the next generation of workforce coming in is very entitled. They're not used to hearing the word no. They're not used to pushback. They expect everything just to be handed on a platter. Now, I don't know if that's exactly true or there's exaggerations there, but what's most important to me is I set the girls up for the real world. And they're 3, 5, and 9, and people are thinking maybe right now, blimey, it's a bit excessive. Well, actually,
you can't plan that when they're 16 because the horse has bolted. I mean, there's a lot of research that says by 5, 6, 7 years old, psychologically, that framework is kind of set.
Well, have you heard the saying, show me a 7-year-old, I'll show you the adult?
Yeah.
So by the age of 7, they're there. So what you've done. And so I want to say no. I don't want to say no to everything, but I want to say no in the right circumstances. I want them to use please and thank you. I think that's really, really important. I want them to be respectful of people. I want them. So now my 9-year-old has reached that age where she says things like, Daddy, what should I be when I'm older? And I said, honey, honestly, happy, safe, fulfilled. That's it. Yeah. I could, if you as long as a parent, I need to prepare you for the world. You need to be safe. So I need you to not be naive. I need you to be aware of the world around you and things that can go wrong. I want you to be happy. Darren Brown's book on Happy, really interesting book. Too long. He filled that out with too much blah, 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 blah. But that got me really thinking about happiness and how important it is. And I hadn't given it enough priority in my own life. And then I think fulfillment is actually what drives happiness, personally. And so that's all I want for them. But in order for them to get there, I don't mind there's a little bit of struggle. I don't mind a little bit of
struggle. I think, you touched on it earlier. However you want to phrase it or package it, I think the way I talk about it in my head is about teaching my kids mental resilience. Like you said.
Exactly. Yeah, lovely.
The word no. Sometimes even when that's not fair.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's life. That you should get X, Y, Z, but tough shit. This week, you don't.
That's life, isn't it?
That got you a bag of sweets, or it got you us buying your favorite movie on Amazon or wherever it was for you to watch. This week, no. And it's funny that it's those little old adages of I talk. There's a couple of things that spring to mind that I've focused on specifically with my daughter. So my kid's very similar age to yours. My boy's 3, my daughter's 7. Very different creatures. But yeah, it kind of phrases a couple of things I talk about with my daughter at length. And I talk about the thing that not everything's fair.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, and this comes back to kind of something we were touching on earlier, that trying to quantify and measure and benchmark everything and go, oh yeah, but X, Y, Z happened, or I did that, so I must get the prize.
Well, that's the kid's line, isn't it? It's not fair, and of course it's not. You couldn't have hit it. You couldn't have said it better. Life is not fair. Welcome.
And what are you going to do about that? Because it's not going to change the outcome. It's not going to change anything. And then something else I talked about, and is that balance of being empathetic and generous, but also balancing that with your own self-importance, self-value. And I think the simplest way I've focused on that with the kids is about toys. Right? So and it's interesting now having Arlo. It was more complex with Elvie when she was younger, because we talk about it in a kind of third party thing of I was at nursery this day and I was playing with this kid and they came up and just snatched this toy off me, or whatever, or asked if they could play with it, and I gave it to them, but I didn't really want to give it to them because I was playing. And we've had that conversation, and it's that interesting nuance of saying to Elvie, look, you can have or be using or playing with something, whatever it is, and someone might come up and ask if they could borrow it, use it, have it, whatever. And I said, it's down to you to decide when it feels right to comply and go, yeah, of course you can have a go. Of course you go play with it. And when you turn and when you turn around and go, actually, no, not right now. And whether that's because you're playing with it or using it at that time, or whether it's just something that's precious to you and you just don't really want to share that thing with it. And I think for me, that's just quite a fun, nuanced thing for her to play around with, because she always, whenever we have the conversations about it, she will bring it up when there's been some particular circumstances. She'll be like, "Oh, but what would you have done, Daddy?" And it's like, it doesn't matter what I would have done, because there's also no right or wrong. There is no, whether you complied or denied, it doesn't matter, as long as you're content, as long as you're happy with why you did that. You can't control that person's outcome. But
it's interesting. So what I've discovered is that R3 are wildly protective of anything that the other one wants. Not because they're playing with it, because they want it. Annabelle, who's 5, will be playing with a particular toy. Sorry, will not be playing with a toy. The toy will be 3 yards away from her. Yeah. And her sister will come over to pick that toy up, and Annabelle will jump on it. I'm playing with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's one of the current battles we're dealing with, which sort of folds into what you're dealing with. You're phrasing it and actually turning it into a proper conversation where my route is more you three stop being arseholes to each other. That's all I want. That's just what I want.
Sometimes it is absolutely that.
Like, you're meant to be best friends. Chill out. You're not even getting the toy.
Elvie grabbed like a rubber dinosaur hand puppet thing last night of Arlo's, which I cannot remember the last time he touched it. And literally the second she put it on her hand, he was all over her. That's fine. I want it.
Hell breaks loose. Yeah.
Dude, you literally haven't even looked at that thing. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw you kick it out of the way like earlier this evening when you were looking for something. Like, shh.
Yeah, if only. But mate, you also touched on something right at the start of this 13 minutes ago, is the dad guilt that doesn't get a lot of airtime.
Yeah.
And I think so today I got a letter today from Evelyn, my oldest girl's school, and she's got her sports day on the 4th of July, and she's got a swimming gala on the 4th of July, yeah, and the 11th of July swimming gala, 1 week after the other. And I can't attend either. I've got Thea on the 4th of July and Kerfuffle on the 11th. Yeah. And what are the chances? Because if it was on the 5th or the 12th, I'm at both.
Yeah.
And I had a real, like, a moment of guilt.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll still feel guilty on the day because I try to go to as many events as possible. The world has changed a lot. My dad, he might have seen me play football at the weekend when we were kids, but never made it to a school event. Like, nothing. Obviously, you were born in school, so again, different experience.
On the other side of the planet from my parents.
Yeah. So the world it is so different, and so 40 years ago, maybe mum guilt was a thing, but now I'm afraid it has to be rebranded as parent guilt. It has. And yeah, it's a real thing, and it's a real struggle, and it's very interesting. I don't know if you spotted that I smiled and nodded as you said, mentally resilient. But when it comes to the mess that is living a life, running a business, and being present for your family, that's the strain, that's the stretch. And I can resonate with that more than I can articulate.
And I think a lot of guys can. I mean, I think it was a few weeks ago in the boys' club, I put a post because I'd been having a really tough time at home. The kids were acting up quite a bit. Hayley and I weren't necessarily agreeing on how to tackle that. And I felt like, and I think as often guys do at home, I felt like, you know, apart from paying the bills, I'm not sure I feel like I'm contributing.
I'm an outsider at the moment.
At the moment, I feel like a complication and a frustration rather than part of the solution. And I think it was really interesting. I shared that within the boys' club. And it was really interesting to see, how many people commented on it, but also how many dads in the group reached out. I mean, I totally get it. If you want to chat, go through that feeling a lot. And I think that's why I wanted us to touch on it, because you and I, we talk a lot about work. We talk a little bit about our families, but we're that family time is very important to us when it happens. And a lot of what we're doing is about creating, you know, the safety and infrastructure and support for those people that we really want. Have you frozen? I think I might have lost you for a second. Benji, I think we've frozen you, mate. Oh, we were on such a good little flow there. Oh, he's gone. He's going to come back. I think I've broken him talking about parenthood. I think it's all got a bit too much. See, this is what happens when you start talking about dad guilt and parent guilt. It fries the internet and it goes into meltdown. But yeah, we'll hopefully get him back. Here he comes. Here he comes. Technology. And he's back. I said, you see what happens about dad guilt? The whole internet freak goes, hold on, this wasn't on the agenda.
That was my daughter's calling me to say I'm late or something, probably there.
There is for burning. Daddy's talking about us. Yeah, but anyway, mate, I think look, it's obviously you bounced out just now, but I think I wanted us to talk about this because I think in many ways, I hate the fact that in almost every female interview I've seen on a podcast, it comes up as a question. And I can't think if I've ever heard it come up in a male interview. So I just felt like that was something that warranted talking about, as you and I.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think it slotted in with a lot of what we've already talked about today. But I think we've done a really nice little waffle around there. You lucky people out there are going to have the delight of us two waffling on in the company of Mr. Matt Giggs not too soon. I've probably blown a big secret there, but that will be centered around a lot more property related. But really would love to hear, as we drop this out, I think we've talked about some very different topics to what typically gets covered in anything property related. And it would be lovely to see people engage in whatever form of content we get from here with Ben or me, whether that's directly, publicly, privately. Join the boys group, tell your mates about it. Share your woes about dad guilt. Share what that looks like for you. I think the more we talk about this stuff and share it, the more we realize we're all kicking the same funny little voices around in our head, and we're all having this very similar questions and doubts about who we are and what we do and the value we contribute to those around us, be it at work or at home. So, buddy, all that is left to say is thank you so much for your time today. Please let Big Tobes give you a little bit of a pounding, but
I was just saying, make no
problem.
Have
an intelligible conversation with Matt in a week's time.
Yeah. I mean, look, cross your fingers on that one. I would like to say I'm not going to let Big Tobes do that to me, but I don't think I'm going to have much of a option.
I don't think Big Tobes is going to give you any choice in that matter, mate. I think float like a butterfly, try not to get stung like a giant bloody bee.
I feel like I'm getting stung. Yeah.
But mate, good on you. Good on you for putting yourself in the ring. As we said, within the various forms of content, whether this drops before or after Ben's fight, we will be sharing the link for the fundraise Ben is doing for Centrepoint. Please, whether it's £1, £5 or more, every little bit helps. And again, Boys Club, join it, comment it, share it, tell your mates about it. The more people we have in there, the more people we can hopefully help. Buddy, thanks again for your time. I will see you soon. Good luck tomorrow night. And it's been fun.
Thanks, mate. Thank you. Really love talking to you.
Have a good one.